Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Welcome back to Blue Boards. Today I want to tell you about my new obsession. And I really do mean obsession. This is Warfighter Shadow War. The reason why I call this an obsession is because I have here Warfighter, the Modern Special Forces card game, and Warfighter, the World War II Pacific combat card game. So I own 3 different versions of this game. I plan on buying a bunch of expansions and probably a couple more core boxes. You can't stop me. I don't have a problem. And that's actually pretty good for a game I found entirely at random. Was just browsing a military game focused board game site. And I saw this game and I was like, soldiers, stealth, sounds like fun. Let's pick it up and give it a go. And I absolutely loved it. I haven't actually set up a game here because every time I've tried it, I've ended up getting it wrong because, of course, you lose 50% of your capacity for quality when you get on camera. So I'll just take my time to walk you through the multiple ideas of the game, and hopefully you'll get a good idea of what's going on out of it. So let's just get these cards out of the way first, because they're not important right now. What's important is that deck of cards right there in the middle. Do you remember the old Rainbow Six games? And I mean the old games, like 2000 Rainbow Six, because I'm old and I remember these quite well. Those games let you customize your troops for the mission ahead, whether it be giving them close combat weaponry, long-range weaponry, checking them up with armor so that they were less likely to get shot and die, all sorts of little equipment that you could use to help you throughout the mission. Warfighter, in every one of its iterations, recreates this part of soldiering, and it does it really well. And let me explain to you how it works. So, generally, you'll need at least one soldier, but you're probably going to need a few soldiers. And there are 3 different kinds of soldiers that you can get here, and these soldiers have a bunch of differences between them, and I'd like to take the opportunity to go through them now. And it's not just these 3 soldiers here. You actually get a pretty decent lineup of soldiers in the base box. So, it's not like you're spoiled for choice, but you still got plenty of choice as to how you want to tackle every particular mission. So you got player soldiers. They usually turn out to be the most expensive because not only do they have roughly the highest cost in points in the top right, and the most abilities to make up for that, but they're also the most capable. You can equip them with anything. They have action cards, which let them do anything from discard enemies to make their shots better, to locations, which they can use to draw locations and move on in the game itself. So they are generally very important, and you need at least one to take along with you in your mission, because you will need to find those locations as you go. They are very capable. They're basically the action movie stars, more or less, right? Because they have a lot of survivability and a lot of staying power, but they cost a lot as a result. However, you might want to just have a relatively quick game, or you might think, oh, I just need a couple of specific roles alongside one player soldier who I'll load for bear. In that case, you have non-player soldiers who can't carry action cards, don't have as much survivability, and sometimes don't have that much in the way of skills that they can add on top of that. But Taylor here, for a 17-point card, is actually a great deal, because he comes with a sniper rifle and a couple of things that'll let him either be more accurate or add more kills onto another card. So he's at 17 points, but the cards that he gets for basically just coming in, and you don't have to pay for these afterwards, these come as the cost of the soldier himself. Where's the other one? There it is. These 3 cards here cost something like 14 points at their maximum cost. So it's either pay 14 to equip all of them to a regular soldier, or pay 17, get them, and an extra soldier on top of that. He can be immensely useful when it comes to a sniper mission, for example. And there are plenty of non-player soldiers that have certain capabilities along those lines. And then you've got the squad soldiers over here. They're basically the guys who go flying every time even a single explosive goes off. They're relatively cheap, but they do have a few capabilities of their own, whether it be simple ways to kill that don't rely on any particular weapon, whether they're like Conway here, who has a bunch of different skills to make up for the fact that he can't hit the broadside of a barn half the time, or whether it be even like another sniper squad soldier. But the nice thing about these soldiers is you don't actually have to manage them that much. Just everything you need to worry about with them is what it says on the card. And so, if you want a game to be relatively simple, take along one player soldier and one squad soldier, and you're done. You can just manage them relatively easily. Or if you want to go loaded for bear, take along 3 player soldiers and 2 non-player soldiers that are armed to the teeth. Probably not the best idea, but you can do it if you want to, and that's half the fun. Because not only you're trying to figure out what you need for the mission, you're trying to figure out what soldiers will work for it. And a lot of the decisions made in this game are based around what you've taken with you, to the point where a good or a bad loadout can absolutely sink or swim a mission, but at the same time, it's not going to be entirely based on chance. It's going to be your screw-up. You're going to learn how to more effectively build soldiers as you go along, as you play more games of Warfighter. And that makes it ever more engaging and intriguing. And that's not even getting into the weapons you've got available to you. So this is what comes with the base box. You've got a bunch of weapons you can work with of a bunch of different kinds. All of the United States, because the US is the main faction that you will get in this box. And they are all over the place. You've got stuff like knives, you've got different kinds of pistols, you've got M14s, which are basically sniper rifles in this case, although I'm pretty sure the M14 is like more like a marksman rifle, not a sniper rifle, but you get what I'm trying to say here, right? You can actually get like proper sniper rifles in the expansions, but this is just what you get in this box, which is a marksman rifle. You get an M249 if you want. You've got different kinds of M4s and M16s that are better at certain things. You've got MP5s, which are like really good at short range. They're short range workhorses, but they're really quiet and they're able to be enhanced relatively easily. So if you manage to load out 2 player soldiers with 2 MP5s, they can be some close combat masters. And you've also got things like mines, which you need to blow up things like buildings, and then you've got M72 Law. So you've got tons of options to work with when you're loading out your troops. And some of these you'll need, some of these you won't. Like, for example, pistols are actually pretty damn cool, because you can use them for self-defense. So if anyone tries to attack you, you can unload the pistol and you won't be attacked by it. Or you can take along an M14 and set someone up relatively far away from an objective. Or you can give a bunch of guys just M4A1 carbines and just send them on down the street and blow the crap out of everything that comes your way. The choice is yours. And that's what I like about it, because you get so many different ways to play around with it. And this also ties into how the missions work, which we'll get to relatively shortly, hopefully, if I can just clean up all of these weapons. But then on top of that, you also got equipment, whether it be body armor, suppressors for guns that aren't actually suppressed, things that'll give you extra quietness or extra ability to hit the target, or the ability to reveal people, or even equipment that's required for a certain mission that you absolutely need to take along. And then you've got skills on top of that, which adds things like ways to be extra quiet, ways to increase how accurate you are, and ways to make you a little bit better at things like hacking or picking, or pistols and submachine guns. You've got a lot of choice, even in the base box, for how you want to go about certain missions. And that's the really cool bit about Warfighter. Being able to load out your dudes to a very specific way and go about a mission however you please. That's the coolest thing about it. And it's also doubled over by the fact that even in the base box here, you get an absolute ton of variety in the objectives. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I'll put them down there. So here are the cards that determine what the mission and the objective is. The mission gives you the parameters. So if I just put down mount up here, and I'll just have like the crop zoom in on it, because I always forget to change the focus on these bloody cameras. But it's got a bunch of things on it here. It's got the amount of money that you can spend, because every card costs a bit of money, like see up here, 22 points. It's also got the time limit for the mission, how far away it is in objectives. So, for example, whatever mission we end up putting down is going to be about here, in this particular case. And it's also got the penalty to the loadout for your soldiers. So, for example, while you've got, say, where's the one I'm thinking of here? It's here somewhere. You've got going small, for example, which forces you to take one soldier, but lets him carry a fair bit more in the way of loadout, and also a fair amount in the way of resources, because spending 46 something points on one soldier will make him a one-man army sometimes. Or you have a mission like Nice and Easy here, which has a lot of resources, but a very heavy penalty to the loadout. So you need to take along a lot of individual soldiers if you really want to take advantage of all those resources. But sometimes you don't even want to do that. Like, let's just take a look at one of the objectives, for example, because it shows off what I mean here perfectly. It's got a series of hostile numbers here, and that's determined by how high the loadout you're carrying is. So if you spend the full 120 points that's available to you, you'll end up in the second lowest tier, I suppose you'd call it, or it'll be the second highest tier as well, where you'll be drawing out 9 points worth of hostiles when you put down this location, or when you activate this location, because it's an objective. And 9 points of hostiles looks like that. So the more equipment you carry along, the more hostiles you're going to have to deal with. And it's a really clever way of not only balancing out the system, but giving you an option as to how long you want to be playing your mission for. Because, with the missions in particular, this one, time 12, but objective 7. So you're going to have 12 soldier turns to do it. But you're going to be taking along a lot of soldiers. You're going to have to be doing a lot of footwork. You're going to have to be doing a lot of managing what all your guys are doing over the course of a few turns. But play something like, let's say, Go, Go, Go. It's only 8 turns. The objective is right here, and you're not going to be able to take along as many soldiers. So it's going to be a lot of a shorter mission. And at the same time, this actually also determines the variety of the mission and how things work. Because the further away it is, the more locations you're going to have to put down, and the more chances there are for something else to go wrong. And this isn't even getting into the insertions and extractions, which add a bit of an extra challenge to the end and beginning of the mission. So if you just want to get in and out on a Humvee, you'll have to add more hostiles as you go, and you'll have to keep the extraction clear for 2 turns at the very end. So that time limit is going to be a fair bit shorter. Or let's say, for example, let's say you want to parachute in. So you have to give up some of those precious resource points, and then at the end, you're going to have to clear out all the hostiles. Or you're going to have to go for Black Hawk, which means you'll have to roll 6+ or the mission just ends and you lose. And you're going to have to spend a lot more resources, but you'll deal with less hostiles as you go. There are so many ways to play around this system. There are so many cool things that you can do to add a little bit extra variety into the mission. And as a result, every single mission feels different. And it's not just because of the missions and the objectives themselves, although there are absolutely a lot of different missions, whether they be taking out a gunboat, which you're pretty much going to have to do with the M72 law, so someone's going to have to carry that around. A VIP defector, where you're going to have to get onto that location and hold it down for 2 turns against the enemy, which is probably going to set off the alarms. Or there's an escaping VIP with a helicopter attached to it, or a hacking center, or a bridge that you need to blow up with explosives, or an assassination, which is really hard to get into until the VIP dies. So you're going to have to plan around every single one of these mission objectives, every single one of these insertions and extractions, and every single one of these mission types. So you might end up needing to break contact, so you're going to need to be constantly rolling at the end. You're going to have to pay a lot of resources, but at the same time, you're going to have to take along an absolutely massive army, and you're going to have to be prepared to defend the VIP at the end. Any one of these changes up, and the mission is entirely different, and you have to make an entirely different plan for it. And as a result, it has an absolute ton of variety, even just in this base box, which has just this North Korean location. And as a result, it's great. But the variety doesn't end there. So let's just make a little bit of a pretend game going on here. We've got Western Galloway on the insertion card. And they end up drawing their hands of actions, and they end up with a couple of locations here. And these locations are all, well, almost. There's a couple that are relatively similar to each other, but they've all got their own considerations to make and their own things to worry about. Whether it be, let's just say, the cost to play them, like the mob. Because if one soldier decides to play this, they're not going to have the actions to move, so they need to think that through. Or if they want to play, for example, the houses, which have not that much in the way of hostiles, but then they have to worry about them being constantly reinforced at the beginning of the turn. Or the open lot, which costs an XP to play and doesn't have any reinforcement rolls, but it costs an absolute ton to enter. Or the dirt road, which doesn't cost anything and doesn't have that much in the way of hostiles, but it makes the next location more dangerous. And it gets even worse than that when your only option is a checkpoint, which is like anytime someone even flinches, they start going for the alarm. And with the 15 locations that they bring along, each with their own considerations, each with their own special abilities, each with their own amounts of hostiles, entrance costs, and location costs. And considering that you're going to have to shuffle these up and draw them at the beginning, and slowly be moving your guys along them, because they can only move one action per turn, it constantly forces you to rethink your strategy on the fly. You'll end up only playing the slum, because that's all you've got, but then you end up having a choice between, say, the checkpoint and the train station, which each come with their own deficits. So you might think, oh, do I want to wait for a better location to come along, or do I want to go through and risk it because I don't have the bloody time? So you decide to wait, and then you pick up something like the collapsed houses, which isn't too bad, but still costs a lot to enter. So poor Galloway here doesn't have that much in the way of maneuverability, so they're both going to have to discard action cards in order to get him in there. You're always having to make these choices as you go. And it makes these individual missions all be way more interesting as a result. And they're really varied too, which is the best part. And it helps create stories. Like, you set this guy up on the dirt road for the VIP assassination, but some guard came along and spotted him and decided to take a couple of pot shots at him. Or you just sneak around the guard tower and you plant a mine there, and you leave it so that when someone else decides to walk along, the mine explodes and takes out someone who's trying to follow you, but it sets off the alarm in the process. There are so many little things like this, and it also carries on to the hostiles. And the hostiles in this game, and the way that they represent, like, searching for you as an enemy to them, is absolutely brilliant. So let me explain how those work. Here they are. They start out what's known as unrevealed, which actually makes them more dangerous, which is absolutely brilliant, but we'll get to that in a moment. So this has a bunch of different things that I'll go over very quickly. So if I just pop open the token box I got down here, it has random movement. So every time the enemy turn comes around, you roll this dice, and if it's outside of the right, moves to the right, like it is right now. If it's to the left, he moves to the left. But if it ended up being a 5 or a 6, he'd stay where he is. So the soldiers move around the enemies, I should say, the hostiles, move around in a random pattern. They also search for you. So they've got 3, 7, and 5 search. I know what this unit is in particular, which is why this makes sense. So the first number is where they search underneath them. The second number is 1 location out. And the third number is 2 locations out. So this guy will be looking for me constantly, and he'll constantly be trying to draw attention to my existence. Not to mention, he also adds a penalty to getting into the location that he's on. He also goes for the alarm super fast, and it costs an absolute ton to evade him. But if we flip him over, it's a guard tower. Bit weird that he's not able to move now that he's here, but there you go. But he costs less to evade. He goes for the alarm a fair bit slower. It costs less to enter the location. He's got less defense, and his search numbers are lesser, just in general. And you can spend resources that you have in the form of night vision goggles to reveal one enemy per turn, although there are ways you can speed that along by using like special actions or equipment. So, it's within your best interest to reveal them as soon as possible, but then again, sometimes it isn't, because if that watchtower gets out of the way, it might end up somewhere that actually ends up benefiting you. And there are so many different kinds of hostiles as well that work this way, so you have just regular old soldiers, just as an example, but one of them might end up being, like, it just looks a little bit weird, like this one in particular. Place one behind rearmost, which is, like, let's just say there was a soldier here, here, and here, they'd go to here, one behind rearmost. But you flip them over, and you realize it's just a bunch of civilians walking by. Just leave them to their own business, and they'll probably just wander off. Except not, because they'll just wander forward, and they'll get in your way. And they have the ability to just wander off to the side, and hell, there's even a really clever, like, play on this concept here. This card in particular. You might think it's just some random, like, soldier running around, right? And you think, okay, I'll just leave him alone, maybe he'll move somewhere. But then you reveal him. You were just staring at nothing. You're just staring at nothing, there's nothing there, and you just get rid of it. It's so clever. As long as you don't memorize the numbers on the unrevealed side, you'll be like, hey, should we reveal this, or should we try and let it get out of the way? Because as you might have noticed, they also tend to move around less when they have been revealed. So you might think, hey, maybe I'll wait for them to get out of my way before I do something. Or I'll reveal them right now and have to deal with the consequences. Because it even goes so far as making them less of a problem to deal with. Like, for example, here. This guy's got 2 reticles, which means you need to shoot him twice in order to actively get him killed. But flip him over, and he's just a regular old guard who only needs 1 shot. And as a result, you never know exactly what you're going to be facing until you actively look for it. And meanwhile, they're hunting you down. So if you've got, like, let's just say all our soldiers are here. If you've got, like, a guy here, and a guy here, these are all pushing up this noise tracker to the right. And every time you move between locations, you need to make what's called a shadows roll. And if you roll above what the shadows is on your soldier's card, you won't make noise. But if you do make noise, it'll drive that tracker up, and it'll make them more likely to spot you. Because over there on the right, it gives you the rolls that you need to make in order to avoid them. So it starts at only needing to roll a 1. And if you roll a 1, they're just like, was there something over there? But when it gets higher, it means that they're more likely to go for the alarm, and they start progressing down this the more actions that you take. So, it becomes this incredibly tense game of just walking back and forth, trying to avoid being spotted, because if you get spotted, these guys come in, and they're aware of you, and they will come straight for you. Even if these guys are only just passively looking for you, and they found evidence that you're there, they still haven't spotted you. These guys come in as soon as the alarm sounds, and they know that you're there, and they will come for you. So you want to avoid that for as much as humanly possible. Not to mention, as soon as the alarm goes off, if these guys even sniff you out, they'll start shooting directly at you. And it makes for this incredibly tense and incredibly enjoyable experience where you're sneaking around, making the opportunity to take shots, because shots make noise, and noise drives that tracker up. So you're deciding whether or not you want to reveal some guys, you're deciding whether or not you want to shoot them once you know what they are, and you're deciding whether or not it's worth the risk, because gunshots in this game work in a certain way, and it's actually really brilliant for this kind of thing. So, if I just pull out a gun in particular that lets me demonstrate this, M4 carbine. So, this gun in particular has the ability to roll either 1 shot, which is 1 attack dice, or 2 shots, which is 2 attack dice. You also need to roll this 6-sided dice. So you need to get above or equal to the number in the bottom left of these hostile cards. But every one of these attack dice you roll drives the noise up. So it's this really engaging trade-off between keeping myself secret, keeping the guy dead, and it works great. So if I just rolled, for example, I got a 1, but I got a 4. So if I was rolling at, say, this guy, I'd get a kill, then I'd suppress them, which would prevent them from going for the alarm, because these weapons are suppressed, and that's meant to emulate the fact that they're being shot at by something they can't see. But then, it gets even better. Because on top of making that roll, you get to make what's called a unaware target draw with these little counters. And these little counters can provide you with all sorts of neat abilities, whether it be giving you a more accurate shot, giving you the ability to just instantly kill an enemy without needing to worry about them going for the alarm, or you'll just not have an angle and miss the shot entirely. And it creates this absolutely fantastic story in your head. Let's just say, for example, Galloway was here. He's being bared down upon by this soldier, and he just can't have him be there any longer. So he aims carefully, gets the absolutely perfect +5/+1, takes a single shot with his gun, and manages to kill the guy because he just had the right thing. Or he goes for his shot and he just has no shot. So here's the story that was happening to me. So I was a two-person team. I had Taylor, the non-player soldier you saw earlier with the sniper rifle, set up on location 3, and I had another player soldier going up the front to activate the objective to make the VIP shootable. Now, the VIP can only be killed in one turn. So he was waiting there, and the sniper, despite the fact he'd been there for 2 turns and was trying to set up his shot, just couldn't get a shot on. He got no shot twice. So then, the good old player soldier who was up the front was like, screw it, I'll do it myself. Managed to fire off the shot and kill the VIP, and they both got out of there. You get these stories constantly when you're playing through Warfighter, and it's brilliant. It's genuinely some of the most enjoyable board game moments I've had in a long time. Because not only was there an element of luck to it, because of the dice rolls and the chit draws and what have you, but every single decision I'd made up to that point had contributed to my success or failure, because we'd spent a long time hanging around the mission card because there were a couple of really annoying soldiers we were waiting for to get out of the way in order to make it so we could actually get through there. And we had basically no time left, but we hadn't been spotted. We'd gone through a bunch of different locations. We'd had time to go for more, but we put down those locations. We made those choices. And even then, if I decided to give the player soldier even a slightly different gun that couldn't do a range 1 attack, we wouldn't have been able to finish that mission because of the time limit on the VIP. Because of all of this, because of all this variety in both the actions that you have available to you, because there are a ton of different actions, like being able to reveal troops, improve all of your chances of hitting, move along your squad soldiers, bring down the noise, automatically get a stealth kill. A bunch of different things you can do to improve your lot. The variety of the missions that you can take on, the variety of equipment that you have available to you, the variety of the enemies, everything from just regular guns to really powerful machine gun teams, to passing civilians, to shadows, to guard posts and guard towers, to just regular old, where are they? There's one here, I know there is. To regular old fanatics that are just wandering around, and you just... The ways that they all interact with each other, the different locations interacting with each other, different action cards interacting with each other, the hostiles interacting with each other, the locations, and the actions to make it a completely different mission every single time. The ways that you are able to load out your soldiers so that you can take on any different amount of missions. The variety in the missions, thanks to the fact that even in the base box, with just such a small amount of cards, it changes up the soldiers you can use, how well equipped they are, how long you've got to do the mission, how far away it is, so the amount of locations you'll need to put out. The variety is intense, even in the base box. And the way that they gameplay eyes stealth, the way they turn it into a game by making it so that they're passively looking for you but won't actively find you unless you make noise by failing a shadows roll while moving. So it's like, shit, I tripped on something, or shit, a spotlight that I didn't manage to avoid, and they managed to see you and come down on you like a ton of bricks, or just managing to perfectly equip a soldier. Perfectly equipped one soldier with the perfect set of weapons, the perfect set of equipment, and making exactly the right decisions as you go to get all the way to the end, get the objective done, and get the hell out with anyone even knowing you were there. The immense satisfaction you get when that happens is something else entirely. And it makes Warfighter, Shadow War, absolutely brilliant. It's probably my favorite board game out of at least the ones that I've played so far. It's possible that it can get dethroned, but genuinely fantastic. Now let me tell you about the things that I don't like about it, because while everything I've just talked about is absolutely great, the stealth system, the outfitting of your soldiers, the way the missions are varied up thanks to the variety of the objectives, the locations, and the hostiles, while that's all genuinely brilliant, well balanced, and incredibly tense, and very enjoyable as a result, there are a couple of downsides to this entire experience that I'd like to talk about. Number one being this manual. This manual is god-awful if you're a new player to the game. It is all over the place. Now, this is the Warfighter Universal Rulebook, because as I already showed you, there are multiple editions of Warfighter, each of which have their own specific rules and regulations about them, right? So, they needed a book that could keep all of those rules in one place. However, for Shadow War specifically, some of the other games can kind of have this problem, but Shadow War is absolutely the worst one that suffered from it, and it also makes it the absolute worst that you can get as a first box when you're new to the series, because the way that they've laid out the rules here is mainly the regular rules out the front, and then in the middle is where all your Shadow War rules are. So while you're learning the game, you're going to be turning back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, trying to remember all of these bloody rules, trying to make it all work, and you're going to make an absolute ton of mistakes on the way. It is a very hard game to learn as a result. And they know that this is a problem because in the recently funded Kickstarter for Warfighter Fantasy, they put up a thing saying, hey, if you back this, we will include a first-time users rulebook version along with the first print copies of the game. Which shows that there's a problem, but they're not taking the right steps to resolve it. I'm not going to say that this is an absolutely awful book. For reference, it actually works fine. If you know what you're looking for and where you're looking for it, it's fine. But even sometimes finding rules as simple as how the hostiles work can be really annoying. So, in the regular Warfighter game, the only locations that technically exist are the mission card, the objective card, and everything in between. So, any hostiles that are on these cards will move back and forth between them. That's absolutely fine. And the way that the hostiles work in those games is that when they get drawn out, they get instantly attached to a character they're going to target, because otherwise it would be a very boring game. In this game in particular, since everybody starts out as no target, and they can just move around and they only get a target when they realize that you're there, it becomes a problem. Because not only do you have to worry about certain locations, you need to worry about them going to the left of this card and the right of this card, and this gap here, like if the objective was on number 4 and this gap here, it means that you've got a lot of different extra rules to learn about, and in the process of me trying to figure out what the rules were in this particular situation, I was moving through the rule book 4 or 5 times in different directions before I understood it. So, for Shadow War specifically, it's an absolute bugger. Now, I do plan on putting up a playthrough of Warfighter Shadow War on this channel eventually to try and help this out, because a lot of the playthroughs of Warfighter Shadow War are relatively bad. They get a lot of rules wrong, they get a bunch of other things wrong, and as a result, it doesn't show off the game at its absolute highest potential. But I just gotta tell you, man, this is a bit rough, and you will be needing to refer to it again and again and again. And even the keywords guide, which, to be fair, this is fine. It's just an alphabetical listing of all the keywords of what's on cards. And by keywords, imagine them like things like First Strike in Magic. They work exactly the same way. They're shortened versions of an actual skill. So if I just get someone as an example, like Shadows is an example. So not only does it work for stealth in this game, but it also works for doing things like hand-to-hand attacks. You just look for Shadows here in this book, and that's it. You've got the definition of it. That's fine, but you're still going to need to be referencing it a lot. And it can be, admittedly, kind of frustrating. And as a result, I found myself relying on those playthroughs and those, and like people on the Discord for Warfighter, because I just couldn't get it right, man. Sometimes I just could not get the rule right, no matter what I do. Despite the fact that I've played like 15 games of this in the last 2 months, which is arguably more than I've played any video or board game in the last 2 months, I still managed to forget the Shadows roll, which is really important because you do that every time you move between locations, which is a lot. So, yeah. Not the best way to learn Warfighter as a core system, I'll tell you that much. Jump cuts. They're fun. Alright, so, back to what I was about to say. There is one other thing about Warfighter which, admittedly, I am not the biggest fan of. And honestly, it kind of slides into like a... I do like her, but at the same time I don't, for reasons we'll get into now. So, the base game itself is absolutely great. You get a ton of content for it, you get a lot of abilities, you get a lot of skills, you get a lot of equipment, you get a lot of soldiers. But they do tend to be a little bit hard on pushing the expansions, because, let me just tell you a story. I was looking up living card games to buy, right? Things like Arkham Horror, Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings the card game, right? And those games have a lot of expansions. And they are genuinely very expensive. But Warfighter has more expansions than any one of those games. It's genuinely insane. There are so many expansions that just buff up the base game's like locations, soldiers, equipment, actions, what have you. And then there are ones that just give you like a full nationality, like Australia, or the United Kingdom, or Russia, or Japan if you're playing the World War II box. Or they'll give you, like, brain work with me here, or they'll give you entirely new locations, like Eastern Europe. For Warfighter Shadow War, there'll be things like take down Bin Laden, or the MV Golden Nori, which was like that ship that was taken over by pirates. You know? They base them off real-world conflicts. And those are really cool, because it gives you a lot more variety in a game that is absolutely begging for it. This system absolutely begs to be expanded, but I feel like they might push it just a little bit too far, because there are a few things that they do which I'm not massively a fan of. I'm a fan of the idea that everything you get in the core box should be everything that you get, and it shouldn't have to advertise too much outside of it. Like, throw in a flyer saying, buy some expansions to expand your game, add new locations, new missions. Fine, thumbs up, I'm okay with that. But this game goes a little bit too far for my taste. So if we just open up the tokens box I've got to organize this here, there's actually a few tokens in here that don't actually do anything if you don't have certain expansions. So for example, right here, the J-Tax. Those are only available to you in a specific expansion that I can't remember. The Meltdown ones, those are only available to you if you have the North Korea Yongbyon expansion and nothing else, because that's the only one that deals with a nuclear plant and therefore uses the Meltdown markers. But not only is there that, there are certain cards in the game which come off as completely useless the first time you look through them if you aren't aware of the fact that there are expansions. And let me just find them for you. You've got things like suppressors. You've got things like... where is it? It's here somewhere. You got things like the Shadows cards as well. There's a few of them, but that's just one example for both of them. So the way Warfighter works is that you do have the ability to add stuff in from other boxes. And if I just pull like something out of here, where's the player deck for my base copy of Warfighter? If I just pull out, say, non-M4, there. Just a regular old M4 carbine. Like, you do have an M4 carbine in this one, but just bear with me on this one. You can use these suppressors and these shadows cards for soldiers that don't have shadows cards in order to give them those abilities and make them playable. But at the same time, it just, for me, it kind of comes around to trying to push the expansions and the other core boxes a bit much, because you're not going to know what these are until you're like, hey, they have expansions for this game. Hey, they have completely different versions of this game. So you find yourself thinking, they're really trying to push the expansions on me. But honestly, it kind of goes one further. Because for some reason, now, I don't know if this was just a Kickstarter thing and I ended up with a copy of this game that came from the Kickstarter, but they give you this book here. Warfighter, Shadow War, Daylight Combat, and PMC Scenario Book. So they give you this book that has a bunch of scenarios, and I don't think there's one that you can play in this book without buying either a completely different core box or some expansions for this game. I'm just looking through the pages right now, and I don't think there is. I genuinely don't think there is, because there's just... They all say Modern Night Core and Expansion 34, Modern Day plus Expansion 27, Modern Night plus 39 and 41. So yeah, it just... It doesn't give you anything you can actually play with. And don't get me wrong, this is kind of a cool thing to include because they even have like some weird rules, like you put down 2 objectives and you need to do both of them in order for the mission to succeed, unlike a normal game where you only have to do 1. And it's a cool idea, but at the same time I just can't help but feel like they're trying to advertise their expansions a lot more. Which, in my personal opinion, just kind of sucks. Because, I mean, even though I wanted to buy the expansions and the core boxes as I was playing through Shadow War, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel a bit too heavy-handed for my tastes. And I get it. They're a company. They need to make money. And these cards really do need to be in here in order to ensure that there's that cross-compatibility there, so that you can take any weapon you want from Warfighter and drop it into Warfighter Shadow War. But I also think it goes 1 or 2 steps too far in some cases. So, there are some abilities that you can only get on certain player and squad soldiers in the base box. So, for example, the guy that I showed off earlier that had a ton of different abilities. Where is he? There he is. Conway, who only has, like pick 7, hack 8. Those are abilities that you can't normally give to soldiers in the base game, but the cards to include them are actually sold in a completely different expansion that costs $30 US and adds cards for all 5 sets of Warfighter core boxes, so that you buy, if you want to buy just one to just get the specific cards for your era of Warfighter, you'll end up having 40 cards or something that you won't know what to do with, unless you go and buy another set of core boxes. Now, they have come out and said that those cards that give you those hack and those pick abilities that they include in that expansion are something that you can do just by saying, hey, just take 4 points off your RP and give yourself this sort of thing. But again, it just feels a bit, like they want you to buy more than you realistically should. Like, I'd love to be able to just buy, like, say, 1 expansion at a time and only just upgrade my core abilities and availability of, like, stuff that I can do. And to be fair, for the original Warfighter, they did that. The first, like, 8 expansions for this box were nothing but new soldiers, weapons, equipment, skills, locations, missions, and objectives for everything you get in this core box. But then after that, it's nothing but different locations with different objectives, hostiles, and locations and missions. Or it's different nationalities. So you get a full set of equipment for, like, say, Italy or France or something like that. You don't get anything else. Warfighter Shadow War didn't get any of that. So if you want to be getting... It only got, like, the locations or the nationalities. So if you want to be getting them, you have to buy one thing to just change this deck up. And then you have to buy another to change these decks up. And I know it's a thing, like, it's the way they just designed the expansions, but again, I just would have loved to have seen a proper Warfighter Shadow War expansion that just expands North Korea and expands the United States. Because one of the rules in the game is that you can only use equipment that has your nationality on it. So it's not like I can bring a bunch of Ruskies in and then give them a bunch of M4s. That's against the rules. So yeah, the whole expansion thing they've got going on, I'm just not a fan of. Even with how cool the interconnectivity of it is. Where you can take anything from one set and bring it into another set. It's great. But it's also just rubbing me in slightly the wrong way. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm done talking about Warfighter Shadow War. Even with the expansions being a bit iffy, even with the rulebook being a piece of garbage if you're actually trying to learn the game, I really do think it's brilliant. There's nothing like it. It feels like old school Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six in a board game. And having played Warfighter, the original core box, which basically feels like Call of Duty in a board game, but we'll get to Warfighter, the base box, another day. But Shadow War, with this combination of equipping soldiers, planning out your missions with a bunch of distinct characteristics that makes them different every single time, the variety of hostiles and locations to make every single mission within that location feel different and feel exciting and feel like it's always going to be by the skin of your teeth, whether it be by your tactical decisions or your roles, and the fact that they've implemented stealth so well in a board game like this is massively impressive to me. And if anyone even looks remotely interested in the idea of Warfighter from this box, I would wholeheartedly recommend that you pick it up. Because it is a genuinely amazing game. Although if you have a bit of a rough time learning from really annoying rulebooks, I'll probably tell you to go with the base Warfighter game instead. Start with that and then move on to Shadow War. And not only that, it gives you a bunch of stuff that you can use in Shadow War. With a couple of extra cards on top, of course. With that said, this has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all next time.